All right. Welcome back to the One of None podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Andrew Ganung,
I'm your other host, Dr. Jonah Casella.
and we have a very different type of podcast today. We have a special guest with us in our first guest on our guest series. He is no other than Dr. Sean Bowling. Sean is a friend of Jonah and I's from college. We all started out in classes together. We were all studying pre-med at the time, so we became very good friends. I'll save the stories for a little bit when we dive into some of how we all got to know each other. But Sean is he is a very smart individual. He's a hardworking guy. He lives by a lot of the values that we hold near and dear to us on this podcast and what we talk about a lot. So we're very excited to have him and bear with us today as we dive into some of the topics. But welcome, Sean. We're happy to have you finally, and we're
Yeah,
excited.
man. Love to have you on finally.
Yeah, thanks for
So,
having me, guys. It's an honor. I think this is your first guest,
Yeah, let's get after it.
so I'm
yeah,
very honored.
Sean, give the people an update on life right now. I
where should we
told him
go?
I did say Dr. Sean Bowling, so Sean did graduate from medical school, but go ahead and tell him what you're doing right now and where you're at.
Uh, so right now I'm a first year orthopedic surgery resident up in York, Pennsylvania. So I'm making my way through my first year, about 6 months into residency. So I got about 5 years left. So just kind of embracing the grind.
Yeah, that's definitely a grind. No doubt about it. So you have 5 years, so 5.5 years then? Like, or 4.5.
It's 5 years total.
Okay.
Plus a fellowship if you decide to do one, which most people do. So it's another year. But otherwise, just 5 years until you can become an attending. So I guess 4.5 more
Gotcha.
years for me.
Light work.
So
That's what Jonah, that like goes along what we were talking about. They'll talk about delayed gratification. Like that is the definition of delayed gratification. You know, Jonah and I, not to say ours is any less difficult or anything like that, but I finished my doctoral degree in 3 years. Jonah's at 4, and Sean's going to be in a lot, a lot longer than that. So,
yeah.
go
Be worth
ahead
it.
and
And
talk to them about, just give them a little insight about like your day to day stuff, what
to
you're
kind
doing
of
right
roughly.
now. I mean, I know that, well, Sean, tell them, I know where you're at right now, and I know you're studying and stuff like that, but I know stuff's about to get a little bit more interesting in the coming next month, once you really start to dive into it. So go ahead and tell them what you're going to be doing.
Yeah. So just like with undergraduate, um, you have to fulfill a certain number of, like what we had liberal arts classes, we have to do certain requirements in residency that are not orthopedics. So my first 6 months of residency are current. I'm not doing any orthopedics right now. I'm actually working at the rehab hospital, seeing patients over there on the medicine service. But once I do start to get into ortho, I think things will start to pick up quite a bit. I'll start taking more call, longer days, earlier mornings, things like that. But right now, I'm kind of in a vacation month, so I only work 5 or 6 hours a day, and so I had to take my boards last week, and yeah, so things are
Yeah.
light at the moment, but things will start picking up pretty crazy here in the next month or
Gotcha.
two. I
How'd
might
you do
not
on
be able
board?
to kind of go anymore.
Ask again, Jonah.
Do you know how you did on boards yet?
No, I'll find out. Um, I think the middle of January. So I took the final stage of my doctor boards, the step 3 or level 3 boards that we have to take. So that was a 2-day exam. It was about 420 multiple choice questions, and then another 26 case based questions where it was like check all the answers that apply, fill in the blank, etc., which are a little more difficult. But most people end up passing that one, which is good. And then I had to take the first set of my orthopedic boards, which don't count in your first year. So it's kind of just like a baseline score for me. So really low pressure exams, not nearly as high pressure as the first two that I took in med school. So those are kind of under my belt now, and I'll get my scores in mid-January. I'm not too terribly worried about them, but with the completion of them now, I can go, I guess, practice at like an urgent care if I wanted to, or Moonlight on the side, but we don't do that in my training program. So that's
Gotcha.
really all that that's not exactly
Awesome.
sure the details on what it allows you to do other than that, but that's pretty much
Okay.
it. So
Nice. Yeah, you know what's funny about that? And then I have a follow-up question that kind of takes us a different way. Is that you're like, yeah, it was like just a 425 question exam with like 20 case study questions. It really wasn't that bad. Like that's just how jaded you are from standardized test taking for the last like 7, 8, 9 years, whatever the fuck it is, you know?
oh, for
So
sure. I mean,
that's
don't get me wrong. I
just a
was
testament
definitely,
to
yeah. Um, I was definitely sitting in there questioning like my life choices, but at least there was no really pressure, kind of attached to it like my first two, where you had to score a certain score to get into a certain specialty or get above a certain threshold to be considered a competitive applicant, etc. So it wasn't nearly as bad as the first two, but it was a 2-day exam, and the first two were only 1 day. So
Gotcha. So I kind of want to like we talked about what you're doing now. We kind of went a little bit into that. I want to take a step back and almost talk about um just briefly like where you grew up, your kind of situation. That's what we talk about on the pod is that it doesn't really matter where you're from. You can do these things. So just give us just a quick background if you don't mind.
yeah. So I definitely would say I had a good childhood. My mom I grew up in Maryland, north of Baltimore. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, my two parents. My mom was a third grade teacher growing up, and my dad was an accountant he worked at different hospitals throughout my childhood. And so I think him coming home and telling stories, even though he wasn't really in medicine, he still had stories of like what happened and what he heard about. And so I think that kind of sparked my interest in medicine. And they weren't really hard on me. They didn't kind of push me in any certain direction. I think I had some inherent motivation um, just through sports and things like that to just kind of uh, be the best that I can in whatever I do. I think that's still I kind of carried that with me to today. But yeah, so I didn't really have like a doctor. My parents weren't doctors. My parents weren't like upper class. They didn't really force me to do anything. They kind of just let me explore my own interests. And so I kind of just took it from there.
Sean, me and Jonah talked about this on previous pods about how we all developed a really close like friend group in college. To those that are listening, Sean was in this friend group. We've probably mentioned Sean on numerous occasions throughout the pods. Sean was a really big piece of our mindset that we had, and he provided a lot of the competition that we had between us three because we had so many classes together, and it fostered a really good environment. And so Jonah was in the honors college, and Sean was too. So I knew Jonah before Sean, and Jonah had introduced me to Sean one day, just in one of the study rooms. And from there, I would always like sneak my way into the honors hall, even if Jonah wasn't there, and I would see Sean there, and we'd just be in the same room. And then just through osmosis, like learning the same stuff, we had a lot of the same classes together. We all started studying, and then it became like, all right, who can push the highest score on the exam? And we're talking about like organic chemistry and biochemistry and all of our chem classes. And I think it was a great environment for us to be improving ourselves. So you mentioned kind of not really being pushed growing up. I can attest to the same exact thing. I didn't really get pushed a whole lot growing up. Do you feel like, from your perspective, that the culture we created in our friend group in college helped a lot, like developing that mindset, or do you feel like that was always inherent even before then?
I think it was inherent before then, but it's funny you say that because I feel the exact same way about you guys. Like, I wanted to compete with you. I feel like you guys carried a lot of the weight, you know? And I really appreciate that because, I'd be dog tired after football practice or workouts or whatever. And I just come to the library and study. You guys it helped having you guys around because, when my tank was a little bit low, it helped knowing that I had two friends at the library who were getting after it, and I was going to be missing out if I didn't show up. So it's funny you say that about me because I thought the same thing about you guys. But yeah, no, you guys certainly helped. I definitely could not have done it without you, for sure, both of you.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun, even
It
just like
was.
having that competition. I mean, I've presented with both of you before in front of teachers. So I've had several with Jonah and then Sean and I in our pharmacology class. And it's like,
Yeah.
looking back, I'm like, I don't know how we didn't just break down laughing half the time. Because, like, I'd say this lightly, but I lose brain cells when I'm with Sean because we just like, we can't have normal conversations. It always ends up in like laughter, and same thing with Jonah. So it's funny that we made it out on top pretty much in most of our
No.
classes that we wanted to, with our how much
Yeah.
fun we have too. So that's cool to have that, like, that friendship where you can have someone competitive or competitively working with you and pushing you, but also have the other side of it where you can have fun and do those other things too. So I certainly enjoyed having that. Jonah, were you about to say something?
I didn't want to interrupt because I was going to add something else just for just to tell everybody. Sean and I met because we were in the honors college and we were neighbors. So like our rooms were right next to each other. And this honors college was like an old OG honors college. Community bathrooms, like the room was super small and you shared it with somebody else. Like no separating door, just like one bed 3 or 4 feet from the next. And so we all got to know each other pretty quickly in the honors college. But
Mhm.
yeah, we were right next door to each other, and that's kind of how part of how we met. But which is awesome. And yeah, like there's so many times of us just being in the honors college, just on the chalkboards for hours, just half dead and just joking about nothing. Like if somebody walked in there, they would be like, "These kids are not going to pass these tests."
Drawing like really obscure like drawings to help us remember stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no.
exactly. Um,
Man, that's a time. What a time.
Sean, do you wanna hit on football a little bit? Let them know kind of what brought you to IUP, I guess, and how that played in.
Yeah, so originally I really wanted to play baseball in college, and ended up breaking my ankle in my recruiting year and kind of missed that really important year. So fortunately, um, found an opportunity to play football in college as a kicker. I played on the Big 33 team, which is kind of an all-star game at the end. It's in the summer um, every year between Maryland and Pennsylvania. And so I was on that team. And my coach knew the coach at IUP, and so that's kind of how I got linked up there. But yeah, no, football was great. It's definitely an important part of my journey for sure. I didn't always love it, especially in college. It's more like a job, but it sort of drove home some important characteristics and character traits that I think have today for sure. So
Yeah, I mean,
I
go ahead,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm gonna dive on something else.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, like it was always like half frustrating to Andrew and I, or at least to me, like not in a serious way. Like you would be like busting it at football, and like you'd roll in and study like not like you didn't study way less than us, but like you just didn't have as much time. And so like you'd be grinding with us, and then we'd all take our exam, and then you would get a better score, and we'd be like, "What the fuck? Like this is I hate this
That's
guy,
not how I
man."
remember it. That's not how I remember it at all.
No, I'm not
Although
taking
we got to
anything away.
remember, all that we got to remember is that we were setting the high scores on those exams, and that's what matters, right? So
Jonah was setting the curve usually.
let's go.
I think yeah, we all kind of did different times.
Yep, we just took turns with it.
Mm.
Sean, I wanted to ask you this. I know Jonah, we haven't really even dove into this either on the separate pod or the other podcast previously, but I know that something that Sean and you, Jonah, I know both of y'all hold this close to you, but I'm interested to kind of get Sean's interpretation on it or just his viewpoint, which hopefully opens up a little bit more conversation regarding it. But as a healthcare provider, how do you? I know that you're strong in your faith. How do you feel like? Do you feel like that's a struggle for you? And I'll even give my 2 cents on it after. But and Jonah, I want you to answer this question as well. As healthcare providers, do either of y'all have difficulty with kind of like drawing the line almost based off of how we learn things in college? You know, how we personally know our faith and the story of how God created everything versus what they try and teach us in school. Did you find it difficult for you to like navigate those waters, or even in practice now, do you find any issue with that, or run into any trouble with like maybe even questioning your own like personal values and stuff?
You mean to go first, or you, Jonah?
Go ahead.
No. So the short answer, no. I don't believe the Bible to be a science book. And what I mean by that is the book of Genesis, which talks about the creation of everything. I think that is meant to explain who did it and not how it was done. And so I've always kind of held the mentality that um, everything is created by God, even evolution. Things have evolved for a reason. And so that's kind of what I hold true. I mean, in terms of my day to day, some of the stuff that I see, especially in the ICU, and some of these patients that require a higher level of care and are more unstable, I kind of rely on it a little bit more because it gives me a reason to have hope. Just because some of the stuff is traumatic, especially these families that come in and they're not used to seeing the patients on the ventilator or sedated, and it's really uncomfortable for them. So it's kind of emotionally heavy sometimes, and so it gives me a reason to kind of lean into my faith a little bit more. It
Yeah,
gives me a reason, or it gives me some hope for something better in the future.
that's great. That's a really good point. And I kind of agree. I have a different path to that, agreeing to that, because I wasn't very religious. I wasn't religious growing up, as I've talked about. I don't know if I've talked about this. It wasn't until I was in college and I met my wife and I met Andrew and our friends, and you guys, that I'd stepped into religion, and I'm a lot more heavy into it now and going to church um, as often as I can on the weekends. But I always felt that evolution's evolution. That's how it happened. And now that I've read the Bible, and I've heard that, I kind of picture it like I agree with what you said, Sean, where I feel like God set up the dominoes and he just hit the first one. And then that's how it happened. You know? Like he created it all and then he just started it.
I agree with both of y'all too. I like both of y'all's answers separately. And Sean, I think you make a great point too with what you said about it talks about who did it and not how it was done. I think I watched something today. I think I was watching on YouTube or something, and people were arguing about the start of it. What was it, the Big Bang or was it God? And it was the guy that was talking about it was like, he's talking to somebody who's arguing that it was the Big Bang, and he said, so basically nothing started everything. And then he was talking to somebody, the same person, and said, what happens when you die? Like, do you just go into nothing? And they're like, yeah. And he said, so you're going back to your creator then, right? And they both agreed that they were going back to their creator, which begs the question that there had to be a maker of something, right? And I think that's a good analogy. I 100% agree. And it's tough in the medical field. I think that we struggle with how we're taught back in college about how everything started. I mean, we learn about evolution in school. It's in every single class of ours.
Right.
And so it's hard to separate the what they're teaching us versus how we were raised and raised on the book of Genesis and how God created everything and Adam and Eve. And I think nowadays it's gotten really far fetched, which I won't dive into, but I think I think it's even harder nowadays to become a Christian because of all this stuff that's being put out there. And I think it gets bogged down a lot, but it's important for us to stay strong in our faith and how we practice too. And Sean, you're exactly right. Like you see it at a much more severe rate than maybe Jonah and I do. We see the patient when they come in after they've probably had a diagnosis or been seeing you already, and they're in a state that's a little bit better than how you're seeing them. So I think it's all the more important that you stay true to that and stay strong in your faith. And I think that's important to hold on to that, especially when you see them the way that they are and see you and stuff like that. It's difficult.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Sean, before we move on?
Yeah, I was just gonna say sometimes I think it takes more faith to not be a believer than it does to actually believe sometimes, and I think it's just, especially with what you're talking about with the Big Bang, some of the logic doesn't always add up, and so uh, it's just easier sometimes to believe in a creator that, especially one that loves you and cares for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
100%.
that's just my stance on it.
Yeah, so I have a different type of question now for you. So we talk a lot about like finding your why and like how important that is. I mean, we've beat it to death. So we have to ask the question, what is your why for this career? Why are you doing it? How has that evolved, excuse me, since you started this journey, like all the way back in high school and then into IUP? What was that like for you?
Um, I think I've always had an innate desire to help people. I guess you guys probably have too, since you guys are both in the medical field. My mom tells me stories of when I was really young, when I wanted to like help my little brother with things and like help him do stuff, even as like a little kid. Um, and so that kind of is the underlying reason for everything. I really want to go. I want to help as many people as I can in the field of orthopedics. I like orthopedics because patients get injured. You fix them, and God willing, they do better. They're able to get back to, at least for the most part, get back to doing what they were supposed to, or what they were doing before, functionality wise. But as far as my why, I want to go somewhere where there's a need um, for orthopedic surgeons, and I want to be able to help as many people as possible in that community. Um, in terms of like what I want my scope of practice to be, I think definitely more general orthopedics, just because that kind of ties back into like if I only focus on joints or hand or sports and I just do shoulder scopes and knee scopes, that's not all they do. But if that's what my main practice is, I'm leaving out all of the good majority of the population. And so that's kind of what I hope to do eventually as I start to get out and practice. And hopefully that kind of extends into other countries as well and doing some mission work. And so in residency, I'm just trying to. I think this program, the training program that I'm at, will definitely get me there. But just developing the skills that I'll need to be able to go do that. Um, so that's kind of my why. Learning as much as I can in 5 years, so that I can go help as many people as I can.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, dude. I think that's great, and there's definitely some overlap between all three of us. I think if you're in the medical field, you have an innate desire for sure to help people, and I see it in you for sure as well. And dude, I'm not trying to get all godly or religious on this pod now, just because we started talking about it. But I do feel like with both of y'all, I think honestly, you're able to bring others to the kingdom of Christ and the word of Christ through practice too. And Sean, it seems like that's where you're going to be heading, and Jonah too. I mean, I'm sure plenty of people feel God's presence with you as well. I encounter it a lot because I talk to people all the time. So I have these conversations with folks all the time, and it's a topic of conversation that comes up when I ask how their Sunday was or how their weekend was. So I think I think all of us are driven in that way, and we can share a lot of those qualities that Sean talks about for sure. Um, and I'm sure people appreciate that too, because ultimately, like that's where I want to be too, and I want to be serving God through my work as well. I want to obviously help people, and Jonah wants to help people too. But I think all of us have that common goal of like, if we can bring another person to Christ or show ourselves and show Christ through us, and that's like the best case scenario.
Yep,
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. I think you have a really good opportunity to do that, Andrew, because you spend so much time with the patients. You spend, I don't know, an hour. How much time do you spend with your patients?
Yeah, anywhere
There's
from
a,
30 to an hour.
yeah, it's a good amount of time. You can kind of really get into that kind of stuff. So,
Well, dude, one of the physicians that I work really closely with in Jacksonville, he's not working the same one as Josh. He's at a different hospital than Josh, but
mhm.
um, he is a really strong Christian, and he is probably one of the most renowned physicians in our area that every single patient that comes in raves about him. I usually will hear from each patient about the orthopedic physicians that they really hate, and that they he caused me to have this, and it's not, he didn't take care of this like I asked him to, or the typical complaints. But I don't think I've ever gotten a single complaint about this guy, and he is really really strong in his faith, and he makes it a point to like be outwardly like talkative about his faith too. And he has the best following, I think, out of all the physicians that I work with. I mean, it's crazy. He has, time and time again, people come in and are like, he's one of the best physicians I've ever worked with. And it's just like, I don't think he's doing anything crazy. He's not doing God's work. He's just, he's living like, he's living
Yeah,
through, Christ.
I think that
And
a
you
lot of
see that.
that comes out like when you just give people time. Like even when you don't have it and they know that you don't have it, but like you take that extra 30 seconds, minute to like actually like look at your patient and be like, "How are you?" Like, no, not just your eyes, like, "How you doing?" And I think that that goes a long way for people because I know that like even for me, like when I go to my dentist and I'm the patient there and he has 30, 35 people patients, he just like will sit there and chat me up and be like, "How you doing? Like, how's work?" And that goes a long way and means a lot more to the patients. So I think that plays a huge part into it. And I'm sure that you guys are like that as much as you can. And your very limited amount of time that you have with each patient, you try and be as caring and humane as possible. Because there's some people out there that are just not like that. Like people come in and they're just a number to them. And they feel that. And that's why the people keep going back to him because that's not how they feel. So yeah, I think that's great. And I know you guys are like that too.
There was I worked with a family medicine doctor in the Dominican Republic. His name is Dr. Eister, and I think he's from New Jersey. But every patient visit, he'd ask like the five, like, how are you doing with the 5 pillars of your health? Like physical, mental, diet, exercise, etc. And then the last question he'd always ask, how's your spiritual health? And if they would say not good, then he would just tell them about Jesus and take that time to try and, I guess, tell them about Jesus. And he ended up um, bringing a lot of people to Christ that way. He had a notebook full. He had like 2 or 3 notebooks filled with every person's name he's ever helped bring to Christ.
That's
So
That's
wild.
incredible.
I know
Yeah.
he was an older guy. He was in his probably 70s or 80s, but I still remember that. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sean, was that the same mission trip that? Do you remember my PCP in Pittsburgh? I told you about her, and I was like, I have a
No, that
buddy
was
that I in
yeah, that
school
was the
with.
second.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a crazy
yeah.
fact for me.
Sean, Sean and I were talking one break in college, and or Sean, you know what it was? Is when we were doing our Bible studies, and we were talking about it, and I had a new PCP in Wexford back in Pennsylvania, and I went to her, and I told her about like I think like mission, or she said she's from Baltimore or from Maryland or something, and I said my buddy is too, and she's like, "Who's your buddy?" And I said his name's Sean Bolin, and he went and did a mission work in another country, and she's like, "Oh, I did too," and sure enough, they knew each other, which is just like an absolutely small world, but
That is bizarre.
That's
that
She
crazy.
wrote
is,
me a little note. It says good luck. I still have it.
oh
I just
really?
sent it. Yeah, yeah. I should send a picture of it to you.
Yeah, that's
That's
pretty
cool.
sweet.
Yeah, she's a good lady. I liked her. Good dog.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
wanted to ask about um, your work ethic a little bit because obviously to get where you're at, all the exams you've been taking, a little bit longer of a route than Jonah and I had. How do you feel? And like, obviously, you're going to be embarking on some longer days and weeks and months over the next couple months. Actually, are you like? How do you feel like that has been with your emotional and like spiritual, health or even your physical health? Because it takes a toll, dude. When you're putting in like 80-hour weeks, that's absurd to anybody, and it takes like a lot of mental willpower to be able to power through those weeks. Like, how do you feel like med school and now embarking on your orthopedic residency? Do you feel like that's going to be a challenge, or do you feel like you're prepared for it, or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I still, aside from residency, I still think the busiest that I've ever been was college, schedule wise. And so that was probably the busiest. Med school, I wasn't nearly as busy in med school as college. I just had to study. That was my only job in med school. College, I had to balance a lot of different stuff. But in residency, yeah, I mean, eventually, as sad as it sounds, um, working that much when you're not really taking care of yourself, you kind of just become like a shell of a person. And I haven't gotten to that point yet. And then compound that with just like kind of getting yelled at by senior residents and attendings that have really high standards for us. And I'm thankful for that. But it kind of just wears on you. And you really have to make a point to take care of yourself. I have a home gym, so I kind of am able to work out when I can there. Spiritual health, I should be doing my devotional a little bit more than I should. But I kind of just roll out of bed, get in the shower, and leave. But yeah, no, it's hard. It's really hard to take care of yourself. But every now and again, I haven't really gotten to this point yet, but actually, I've learned a lot in the first 5 months. But you kind of just stop and think about how much you've actually learned since you've started, and it kind of keeps you going. Like I haven't even really started orthopedics, but I know way more than I did 5 months ago. So I'm really happy about that. But yeah, you just
Yeah.
kind of gotta keep pushing.
That's a really good point, is having that perspective when things get hard to like look back and just remember like where you came from and where it all began, and how much you've put into it, and all the times where you were like, I don't know if I can keep doing this, and you did, and then you're here. So, you've been able to like stack those bricks for years and years, and so that has built a nice foundation for you going forward. But now I'm sure that it's going to be tough. But I have no I have every bit of confidence in you. Like, there's certain people like that you might think, I don't know, you know, um, like, that's true. And you guys were never those people. It was just like a guarantee. As soon as we started studying and I saw like how hard you guys worked, I was like, yeah, we're gonna be there. We'll be there one day.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, that was a no-brainer for sure. I
Yeah.
think with both of y'all as well. Like that's just someone's about to get it done, and the people that aren't going to get it done. And it comes down to like, dude, the same people that I would say I was questionable about in college are the same people I'm still questionable about to this day.
A couple of names come to mind.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we all know exactly who those people are too, which is so funny because we're all laughing at that. But I mean, dude, those people ultimately, and I think this ties it well into what Joan and I have talked about in previous podcasts, is like those people never, I don't want to say never, but they rarely like change. Like they're gonna go throughout their lives, and yeah, they're gonna have success, like small successes, and they get the opportunity to do something cool and they post about it, but like ultimately those people are the same. And I think like unless you're cultivating a friend group and a work ethic day in and day out purposefully and do that every single day, like that's what's going to change my mind. But those people have stayed consistent with how they behave every single year that we've known them. And some of them I don't even know them anymore. I don't really keep in touch, but I'll see like them post. I'm like, yep, they're up to the same thing they've always been doing. And I think that's so important of having a small circle because we held each other accountable. I know I know on numerous occasions I would get anxiety because I knew that Sean and Jonah were working and I wasn't.
Yeah,
Like
same.
it was,
That was real. That was real.
oh my gosh, especially if like one of us didn't drink over the weekend and you were the one that was drinking and you woke up and Sean was in like the honors college at like 8. I'd be like, yep, I'm done. Like I might as well just not even be productive today because I know Sean's like already in the books. I would just get so
Yeah.
anxious about it because it was like such a good competition between us.
Yeah. No, that actually brings up a good point. Sorry if I'm kind of steering things. But if you were to ask me what the number one factor for building success is, probably the friend group thing for sure. Even at med school, shout out to Joe, Nick, and Jared if they ever listen. But my three closest friends in med school, we all matched really competitive residency positions, and they definitely had a big influence on me too. When I was studying for my first set of boards, my one buddy Nick, who is literally he's like a robot. He just work. He just like he doesn't even think about he just works. That's all he does. He's like an ox. Gets up same time every day. Goes to the gym. And I'd get up a little bit later. I knew he was at the gym, so I'd have to go to the gym. And then I knew he'd beat me to the library. And then I'd have to go to the library and see him sit there in that seat before I got there. And every day it was like a cycle, and it drove me freaking crazy. But because of that, um, I did well on and I couldn't leave the seat until he left. I just could not do it. And he works like an ox, and just tough to compete with. But yeah, no, that's important. You got to have friends that are either on the same level of you as you, work ethic and value wise, or even a little bit ahead of the game. So we have to keep up or push each other for sure.
Yeah. No, you definitely need that because if you have somebody, not that it's bad, but if you have somebody that's like we all know a couple people that would step into our circle at the library to ask us questions or like, did you do this quiz or this homework? They were just kind of like half like mooching. It's like the leeches.
Yeah.
It's like you wanted the people that were gonna like go through it and find the solutions with you, not the ones that we're going to wait until you did it and then just get the answer. So yeah, I agree. You got to have equal or even better, just people that are, like you said, work like an ox in your circle.
I think honestly, Sean, that's like that drove it home because it's so cool to have those people. Like as much as it drives you crazy, I would not want it any other way besides that. I'd rather have somebody, and arguably someone who's better than me, always just a step ahead because it forces me to do that. I mean, I can think of times where 5 minutes before I'm about to do something that I'm about to hate to do, I get a text from somebody else saying, "Hey, I just finished this." There's no better thing to get me to do that thing than somebody doing that. And you know how that was with us. I mean, that was every single day I felt that way with y'all. And
Yeah.
as much as it drove me crazy sometimes and it made me anxious and nervous that I was unprepared or whatever it was, there's no better thing that could have happened to me in college when we were all together doing that because it cultivated such a strong, like, it just the next step. Every single person took it one step higher and one step higher to the point where we were just like absolute dogs with our work ethic. And then that transitioned us really well into college or to our post, college career, which certainly didn't prepare me enough. I think Joan and I have already talked about that. We got hit with a wave of a reality check once we got to our respective schools. But Sean, that brings up a good question, actually. Jonah, were you going to say something?
No, you're good.
Okay. I was going to say, Sean, how do you feel like college prepares you for med school? Because Joan and I have talked about this before, and I'm curious to see your take on it.
The biggest difference that I noticed was just the maturity level of my classmates versus me. Because I was kind of fresh out of college. I didn't take any gap years or anything. A lot of my classmates were at least 2 years older than me. And some had families. A lot of them were married. My one classmate is in his like 50s, so he's like on his second career. So you get to meet a lot of different people in different walks of life. And in college, I kind of just acted like an idiot, especially when we would go out and things like that. And then seeing how my classmates acted, it kind of like showed me that I need to kind of tighten my act up and act a little bit more professionally. But in the classroom, I think that was more of an advantage because I had been studying for 4 years straight undergrad. I didn't take any time off. My classmates that took time off, they had to remember how to study again. So, I mean, it was definitely, it's like drinking from a fire hose. Everyone says that, which is true. We took like 148 tests in 2 years in med school, sometimes 3 tests a week, and you only had 2 days to study. That did we take genetics? So I took genetics with both you guys. We took our genetics course in 2 weeks, the same one that we took in college in 4 months. So it's like you gotta just.
The first week in optometry school, we did general anatomy in a week.
Yeah. So a little bit different, but so that was the thing that I noticed most, just like there was a difference in maturity level for sure. But being around those people that they're already ahead of you in life, you learn to tighten up quick. So that kind of ties it back into what we were just talking about.
Yeah,
I think
great.
I agree. And I think honestly, dude, it probably emotionally matured us as well. Well, maybe in all aspects. I think it forced us to like emotionally mature faster than maybe our counterparts that like were starting their regular career and were still kind of like it was just a 9 to 5 for them. And then they would every single night go out for happy hour and then do the same thing over the weekends. I know it affected me emotionally. Like I was just dialed for 3 years during PT school. I drank less than ever before because I was just like every day was studying, even on the weekends. On Sundays, I'd wake up at 6 and study. So,
yeah,
I mean, it forces you to mature.
Of a different. That's very interesting. This is interesting because I leaving IUP a year early, like still had a year of degeneracy left. We're like work hard and play hard, and did like a lot of growing up in a hurry, like emotionally and in my maturity, and also like in Aubrey and I's relationship. Like put a toll on that. It was like a big learning curve for me. So it's interesting, like your perspectives were a little bit different than mine. I was still just the same idiot for the first year.
If
I
it
was
wasn't for COVID,
I
I
wasn't
probably would have too. Yeah.
Mm.
I wasn't. I'm not gonna say I was prepared for PT school when I got there with my maturity. I was definitely still. I had my butt handed to me on day one, pretty much. So I think we all can attest to that. But I got it together quickly. I'll say that. Like just like Sean said too. It forces you
Yeah.
to. You got to be when there's everyone else around you, especially that first exam. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was not set. We were used to setting the curve, and now you're on the low end of the totem pole. First exam, I must have bombed. I think all of us did, really. We all got probably C's and D's on it. It was our first test in school. Jonah, is that what happened with you?
Yeah, I got, like, some people don't think it's bad, but it was bad for me. I got like an 80 on that on my first test in optometry school after we were hammering A's and B's for days and for years at IUP. Yeah, so I got slapped in the face right away.
Yeah, I think we all got our butts handed to us pretty quickly. But
Yeah.
Sean, I don't know if you have anything else you want to kind of chat about, but I think that about wraps it up for this episode. It was awesome having you on here. We've been trying to get this to happen for a little bit now, and thank the good Lord above us. He ended up giving Sean a wee little bit of Wi-Fi to last us through this podcast.
Yeah, man.
Smoke
Thank you so
into
much.
take a look at
Exactly, yeah.
the router.
But yeah, dude, thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, this is awesome. And we're pumped to have you as the first guest. I mean, when Andrew brought it up, I was like, yeah, no brainer. Who better than to have on than somebody we grinded it out with for so many years. So thanks for coming on and just talking a little bit about yourself for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. It was fun. Honestly, first podcast. It was fun. Yeah, it's an honor to be your first guest, and yeah, you guys are doing a cool thing here, and definitely your biggest fan. So
Well, that about wraps it up. So be on the lookout. We'll be posting this likely tomorrow. By the time it comes all together and me and Jonah finish editing it, it'll probably be tomorrow or the following day. So be on the lookout for it. Again, we're posting on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. Jonah and I and Sean are not on social media right now. So we are all taking a hiatus from it for the time being, but we will be posting it. So if you're not a frequent listener, be on the lookout for it. We are going to be posting it on the platforms still. So thank you all for listening. As per usual, we appreciate y'all. If you like the podcast, share it with somebody, please. Spread the word about us. If you learned something from it, spread the word. And again, thanks, Sean, for hopping on. Jonah, I don't know if you have anything else, but
No, that's it for me.
all right. We'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
I got that